Do conversations about business finances make your eyes glaze over? Most conversations about money are logical, rigid, and rooted in harmful capitalist practices. But Lindsay Bryan-Podvin is here to set the record straight. Lindsay is a certified financial therapist, founder of Mind Money Balance, and author of the book, The Financial Anxiety Solution. And she is here today to help us bridge the gap between our heads and our hearts when it comes to navigating the financial landscape of our businesses. By viewing money through a holistic lens, Lindsay offers a financial paradigm that privileges self-trust, safety, and empowered decision-making. We are moving beyond financial literacy, and we are diving into financial self-care and sustainability. It feels so much better over here. This conversation was originally recorded for my fundraising event, the Rest and Success Code, and it is perfect if you're craving a more holistic approach to financial wellness. And don't forget to text the link to this episode to your business besties so that they can benefit from Lindsay's wisdom and be a sounding board so that you have someone to talk to about how you are going to weave more financial wellness into your life and business after listening to this conversation. All right, let's do this. Put away your spreadsheets, open your heart, and enjoy this deeply rested conversation with Lindsay Bryan-Podvin. Welcome to Deeply Rested, the podcast that helps people doing good work in the world take incredibly good care of themselves. I'm your host, retired therapist and disillusioned business coach, Megan Megginson. I'm on a mission to help people like you unlearn the rules that keep you trapped in self-doubt so that you can recover from burnout and finally become deeply rested. If you enjoyed today's show, be sure to subscribe to this podcast and join our weekly newsletter at deeplyrested.com/newsletter. Now, it's time for the show. Hello, Lindsay.
Hi, Megan. I feel like I've been recording with you and talking about Rest and Success Code via so many different video chats and emails. So it is kind of surreal, but it's here. And
I know.
I'm excited to be here.
I am so excited to have you here, and I am very excited to see where this conversation takes us today. I have a feeling we're going to be delightfully surprised by some of the things that emerge. So let's not keep the people waiting, Lindsay. Let's get into this. So for those of you listening who are new to Lindsay and her work, Lindsay is a certified financial therapist, and your work, Lindsay, centers around the intersection of money and mental health. And I think that this is so important for business owners specifically. Inside of myself as a business owner, am I really examining what the intersection of money and mental health looks like for me? And then you and I were talking back and forth with video messages about what do we want to talk about in this interview? There's so many directions we can go. And we kept kind of arriving back at a similar theme we've experienced personally and with our clients around the way external expectations and internal perfectionism can really stifle us and shut us down as business owners. So just to get us started, I would love to hear you speak a little bit to the way expectations and perfectionism have shown up for you and for your clients.
Oh my gosh. Well, this is a great question because I'm a Virgo. I like to say I'm a recovering perfectionist, and I'm also an eldest child. So what that looks like for me as a financial therapist in private practice is I look back on when I started out and how I wanted to do things, quote unquote, right. And to me, that meant seeking the expert opinion of other people and then executing it exactly as they prescribed to me. But, and anybody listening can probably imagine that doesn't work for most external expectations, and it certainly doesn't work in our business. And I had to do a lot of internal reckoning and reorganizing and recalibrating to figure out what my relationship with my business was going to be, what felt good to me, and how to thread the needle between best business practices and also best practices that felt good in my body and that were sustainable for me. But it was a lot of trial and error. And I think conversations like this are so welcome because so many of us have the trial and error behind closed doors. So to just normalize and validate that if you've experienced any of the things that Megan and I are talking about, you're not alone.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, you were so far from alone. And I want to just highlight what you said about we step into this trap when we do things exactly as they are prescribed to us by other people, right? It's like the external expectation. There's this part of us that believes that other people know more than we do. Other people are smarter than we are or wiser than we are. So we should defer to their advice and their wisdom. And we do it without actually checking in with ourselves first to see like, well, does that resonate for me? Does that feel good for me? And if we are struggling with perfectionism, we are then doing this dance between trying to meet the expectations of others and trying to do it in a way that ensures we get an A+ on our assignment. And then we're just like, we are just on the hamster wheel that, like you said, isn't sustainable whatsoever. And I know you have some interesting perspectives on how this dance shows up financially in our businesses too, like the relationship between money and expectations and perfectionism. Tell me more about what this looks like financially inside of our businesses.
To take a step back before we even get to the business part, I think it's important to just level set that the financial industry as a whole has really leveraged our overall anxiety of wanting to do money right by making it sound like you are only good with money if you do these handful of things. And so when we then kind of take that background and layer it into our businesses, particularly as service-based business owners who have our own internal moral and ethical compass, it can become really distressing because we want to do the right thing, but we also don't know what the right thing is for us because so many of us have never explored our relationship with money outside of our businesses. So because we don't even have an understanding of what we think and feel and believe about money heading into our businesses, it can be like diving into the deep end, trying to figure it out. And to play with that metaphor, if you're diving into the deep end of your business and trying to create a financially viable option, you're going to scan the horizon for every single thing that you can grab onto and in really quick succession. So I often see people kind of over-consuming other people's content and learning of how to do business the right way. So they're in the deep end, everything floating by looks like a life draft. And so they're grabbing master classes and they're downloading 100 podcasts and they're signing up for so many accountability groups. But they haven't even paused to think about where they are in business and what they want and what best suits their needs. It's not to say that the people out there teaching and training, raise his hand, aren't doing good things, but we are not the best fit for every person. So it's so important that before we consume, we take a beat to tune into what we actually need. And so we can start out by right away letting a lot of money flow out of our business in the name of doing business right. And then that kind of side effect of consuming all of this content without actually checking into your inner compass is that you may not be able to actually implement some of the tools and tips and strategies that are very well-meaning and may very well be viable for your offer. And it kind of gets coupled with all of these other side effects, such as underpricing your services or struggling to maintain healthy financial boundaries in service-based business owners. This could look like not only pricing too low, but maybe struggling to adhere to things like a late cancellation fee or a no-show fee, or how much money you allow your clients to owe you before you temporarily discontinue services. Or if you're doing something like a speaking engagement or a consulting engagement, not asking for compensation or not asking for enough compensation. And it can also look like the anxiety of throwing more money at things can intensify. And so we might start to do things like financially outsource in our business when we're not ready. So we spend money on a custom website, but we don't even know what our niche is. Or we spend money on Facebook ads, but we actually never hang out on Facebook and don't really have a good grasp of how it works or if our clients are there. So those are some of the things that I see come up again and again when we are financially turning to others to tell us what to do.
So many things here we could dive into. I want to just tug on a couple of specific threads that are really resonating for me as I'm listening to you right now. First, I so appreciate this really gentle reminder that it starts with you first, right? That you can't just dive into, business finances if you haven't really kind of slowed down and examined your own personal relationship with money, the money stories that you are bringing in to your business as a human who has existed in this capitalistic society. So money is an inside job, and understanding our relationship with it, it's an inside job first. And if you do the personal work first, you are going to step into your business from a much more grounded financial perspective. You're going to be able to kind of see the forest for the trees and really be an informed consumer when it comes to identifying what do I need and what is supportive to me. And then I can just let go of all of the other things that I quote should be doing. It's such a powerful reminder. So thank you for that. You said something that I have to mention because it's a theme that shows up in another interview this season with Safira Rajan, and it's about consuming and how we're all consuming so much information and content that we really lose connection to our own intuitive and creative self. And I'm just wondering if there's anything else that you want to say about that, especially to people who are consuming so much content, masterclasses, podcasts, blog posts, email newsletters. They're consuming so much that they've really lost that connection to their own intuition. What do you want to say to those folks? Any words of wisdom?
Oh, I just want to say, been there, done that, and we'll do it again. Because every single time we try out something new, particularly for folks who are in similar fields, we have been conditioned to turn to other people to tell us what to do. In academia, we are supposed to only look at the research and only engage in interventions that are evidence-based. We are supposed to put ourselves at the door and be blank slate therapists. We are supposed to question when things like countertransference comes up, what's wrong with us, rather than saying yes, there may be something wrong with me. And also, this may be a huge red flag or a huge, lesson that the person sitting across from me actually isn't my ideal client. So I think I want to first just say, been there, done that, and we'll do it again. And it's so hard to unlearn the framework of learning that we have been conditioned to do. So something before we hit record, we were talking about our own experiences with this kind of paradox of too much choice and how when we have so many choices, we almost never take action. You and I were talking about how to choose a shade of paint. And you said, it was so great. I worked with this color consultant and they gave me 3 colors to choose from, which I could actually then do something with versus taking a palette of 136 shades of green and trying to make a decision. So as you are consuming this information, I invite you to think about what are the things that actually don't even deserve to be on your plate, be in your ears, be kind of landing in your inbox in this season of your business. Hit pause, unsubscribe, maybe unfollow some of those folks and don't feel guilty or bad about it. I think I can share for myself, and I imagine you share a similar philosophy, Megan, that if somebody unfollows me or unsubscribe, I really, truly honor their own consent and discernment that my voice, my work, my offerings weren't for them in that moment or may never be for them, and that's okay. Right. And when it makes sense to come back into my world, they can get back in touch with me.
Right. I couldn't agree more. And something that I do a lot in my own life and really encourage my clients to do is what I call a curated inbox or a curated social feed. So if you're feeling overwhelmed by the amount of information that is coming at you through all the newsletters you've signed up for, all the people you follow on Instagram, or whatever it may be, I really believe in taking a deep breath, opening the email, and really checking in with your body and being like, how does this person's content make me feel? If it brings me up into my head, if it makes me like all of my like little perfectionistic thoughts are like, oh God, now I need to do this and I need to do that. And now I'm stressed and there's more to do. If it like brings me into that really kind of frenetic, busy doing space, unsubscribe. Like it's not serving me right now. Or if it triggers for me, and this feeling really lives like deep in my gut, this feeling of like compare and despair, right? If it kind of like
Yes.
triggers that like, oh, this person's doing that, so I can't do this. And like if it brings you into a place of comparison and self-doubt, unsubscribe. The only content I want to show up in my inbox or on my feed is content that makes me feel like warm and grounded in my heart. Like I want it to make me feel good. I don't want it to induce busyness. I don't want it to induce overwhelm or comparison. And I think that we all have to find our way to curation, to really making sure that the information we're consuming makes us feel good and encourages us to trust ourselves and to trust our own intuition. And with that, making sure that what you're curating also includes a really diverse set of voices too. And like really looking at the identities of the people that I'm learning from and making sure that I am exposed to different people from different backgrounds. And that's a process that I think I will never be finished. I'll never be like, great, I've figured it out. I'm I've curated the perfect amount of content for me. It really is like a day-to-day activity. But I love that this is where we're starting. Just honestly assess how much information is coming at you. How many people are you looking to externally to give you the answer about how to feel better or what to do next? And let's begin the process of really coming back into ourselves and reclaiming our own natural, intuitive ability to know which direction we move when. How does that land for you, Lindsay?
Yeah, I'm pausing because it just goes back to the chats we've had before we're having this one right here, which is oftentimes the key to alleviate these shoulds when it comes to our business is tending to ourselves financially with something called financial self-care. And so many of us are familiar with self-care as a practice. And we also know that, Megan, a practice that works for you might not work for me. And it doesn't mean the practice you're using is bad or wrong, or the practices that I'm using are bad or wrong. But we learn to trust ourselves and say, my body, my brain, my spirit, my soul needs this in this moment. And that's okay. And so when we think about moving into taking steps to practice financial self-care, I believe that it can help dial down that anxiety because it just quiets the noise of the things that are coming your way, right? If I'm not a runner, I don't play one on TV, I have no interest in doing it. I did one 5K in my life because I felt like I quote unquote should, and turns out I hate it. And rather than beating myself up and being like, well, I just didn't train right, or I didn't have the right shoes, or I didn't wear the right clothes, I can just honor that that's not something that feels good to me in my body, and I much move my body in other ways. When we think about nurturing ourselves financially, we have to figure out, what are the financial self-care practices that work for me now? And what are the ones that like maybe I'll keep on the horizon, or maybe I'll put in my back pocket to use at a future time? And when I think about financial self-care, much like self-care is to wellness, to me, financial self-care is the same thing to financial wellness. Financial self-care to me is any individual act that takes us toward our version of financial wellness. And to me, financial wellness includes a ton of discernment. It is not just financial literacy or business acumen or business plans or Q3, 4, 5. There's no Q5. Planning, right? But it's figuring out What are the things that I want? How do I understand them? And how am I able to implement them in a way that, yes, supports me financially, but in supporting me financially, pours over into other domains of my life, such as my physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being.
So I would love to hear some examples of financial self-care practices.
Yeah. So outside of our business, to take a step out, I think it's helpful to have a little bit of both. It could be something like, I really value spending more money to purchase food locally when it is available. And that would be a financial self-care practice, which may sound counterintuitive because so much financial literacy is about cutting and saving and scripting. But if that's of value to me and I have the means to do so, then that may be an act of financial self-care. It may also be something like putting money in your retirement account. That could be an act of financial self-care. It could also be an act of financial self-care that when a niece or nephew is doing fundraising, you have the capacity to write them a check or to even adhere to a boundary and say, hey, I don't do school fundraisers, but what I will do is maybe buy you your pair of soccer cleats, right? Figuring out what feels good to give and receive and to pay for and to save for. Those are financial self-care practices. And so in business, they might look like adhering to your fee or making a concerted effort to slide your scale. Or if you operate groups, maybe offering a handful of scholarships. It could also be doing things like making sure that you're looking at your money once a week, once a month, reconciling your books, some of those things that you might be putting off, but actually taking care of them and making sure everything looks good is an act of financial self-care.
Wow. These examples are so helpful, Lindsay. They're so clear. And there's a through line here I'm noticing that I really love, which is how many of these financial self-care practices are really examples of how we live into our core values. Like the self-care practices are examples of how I practice what I preach. When if I say I value local food and healthy eating, I move money in that direction. If I say I value long-term financial security, I move money into my retirement account. If I say that I value community care, then I am putting money into my community. And if I say I value things like groundedness and peacefulness as a business owner, then I'm going to make sure I'm looking at my books once a month and reconciling my accounts. And there's a way that every single example you just shared can be matched up with a core value. And I have to just throw a plug in here. So many things you're saying connect to other interviews that we have this season. And this is reminding me of this season's conversation with Gina Gomez, who talked about how to create a personal code of ethics and a values script as a business owner. So if you're listening to this now and you're like, this really resonates, make sure you also listen to Gina's interview because you can come up with your values and your ethics and then come back to this conversation and ask yourself, how do I create a set of financial self-care practices that align with the core values that I want to really live into in my business and in my life? I think that's a really deep and special part of what you are offering us here, Lindsay.
Thank you. The other thing that's coming up as I hear you talk about creating a roadmap and a script that you can lean on when it comes to your values in business is to also remember that most of us in some way, shape, or form came into this field because we care deeply about helping, healing, nurturing a particular population. And in the system that we live in, it is impossible to do that if we are not generating profit. And if that feels icky to you, I would like for you to maybe think about generating financial sustainability, right? We cannot serve clients if we are charging so little. We cannot serve clients if we are welcoming in 50 people into a group program when our capacity is really more like 10 or 12 people. We cannot be our best versions of ourselves if we are working at nights and really our energy is best first thing in the morning. So a part of this financial self-care is also making sure that you can continue to do the type of changing work that you love to do for as long as it feels safe and good and nurturing to do it. And a big part of that is making sure that your practice is financially sustainable.
I love that reframe. Like if sitting with words like, profitability, if that gives you like the icky, I don't want to be a part of that capitalist system vibes, replace it with financial sustainability. Like there are ways, and what a beautiful way to really deprogram ourselves from toxic capitalism. I mean, the reality is we do live in this world and we do need cash money to buy things like food and housing. So what we're doing as humans and business owners who want to deprogram from the toxicity that we've internalized is we have to learn how to walk in both worlds. Right? We have to learn how to like walk in a world that is more rooted in our values, and our connection to nature and to each other. And then we have to also walk in the world where money is the tool and the vehicle that meets our material needs, our physical needs. And I think that reframe to making sure I have a business that is financially sustainable is a really lovely example of how you can walk in both of those worlds as a business owner. So thank you. Thank you for that phrase.
My pleasure.
So I just want to name that I think financial self-care in the way that you are describing it is the key that could potentially unlock the way many of us are trapped in expectations and perfectionism, that like by naming our values and by taking care of ourselves financially, both personally and taking care of our businesses financially, we begin to create more space to really think about what is it that I want? I'm curating the content that comes into me now so that I'm really inspired by what I'm receiving, and I'm allowing myself to be more human and not to have to perform to get A pluses, to be on the honor roll, whatever that means for you and your business. It feels like there's a connection here between overcoming those struggles and taking care of ourselves financially. And I'm wondering if you can help me just like bring these two pieces together. What is the connection point?
Yeah, beautiful segue. To me, the connection point is self-trust. I imagine for some people who are listening, the idea of practicing financial self-care sounds very foreign or different because they don't know, or they are struggling to trust that what they are doing in their business is right for them. So I think when we can practice self-trust, it becomes that two-way street. When we trust ourselves to try something out in our businesses, it may lead to an idea about what types of financial self-care practices work for us, or we want to try out, or we're like, ooh, actually, I can implement this or try this. So to me, it's about self-trust.
I couldn't agree more. And I just have this huge smile on my face right now because self-trust is the through line this season. We're all in every conversation we have tapped into self-trust. Where does self-trust fit into this? And my work, helping people deprogram from capitalism, self-trust is one of the biggest elements that we work on together, right? To reclaim trust in ourselves is one of the biggest, most beautiful things you can do to pull yourself out of toxicity and really root yourself in to your values. And I want to take this, let's go personal with this, Lindsay.
Okay.
Because you and I share some similar stories in terms of as we in our own lives and businesses have started tapping into self-trust, it has illuminated things we've created that we've needed to decommission, walk away from, close down entirely. So I would love to hear your story about the program that you decided to close and how self-trust was a really important part of that process for you.
I'm so glad you brought this up. And I didn't think, just to name it, I didn't think it would cause, it's not even anxiety, but it's just like a little bit of what's a good word for like pre-anxiety? Help me out with some
Yeah. It's like a tinge of vulnerability, right? It's like, okay, I'm gonna share, because even though, and I know exactly what you're describing. It's like, even though I feel so proud of the choices that I've made and so certain that they are the right choices for me, it is still, these choices are still so counter to what is, quote, right and acceptable in society at large that it's kind of scary. It's like, okay, I'm going to show you this thing and I hope you're going to be nice to me about it, or I hope you're not going to judge me for this. It's a really interesting dichotomy to feel so certain in our bodies, but then to feel so vulnerable showing it to the broader world.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for helping me tease out what was coming up. So I had run 7 successful and very profitable cohorts of a group coaching program specifically for therapists who wanted to do some money work and needed some help cultivating self-trust, and were just kind of spinning their wheels about like what marketing works, what doesn't. And it was born really organically out of my own practice of it filling up really quickly and having a wait list and having colleagues say, how'd you do that? Tell me. And I thought, I'll answer this in a group program. So over 3.5 years, I ran this cohort 7 times. And right before I ran it the 7th time, I got ready to launch it. I had this knowing that this was not the work I was meant to do at this season in my life. I was doing this work because I was good at it. People were getting results. It was profitable. And, in business, this would be what somebody would say, Lindsay, that's your golden goose. That's your golden ticket. Just keep running it, But I didn't want to. Mm-hmm. And also, I felt like I wanted to end things on a high note. So I was incredibly transparent during that launch. I kind of changed all the copy and didn't necessarily burn it down, but did a good amount of tweaking. And I just said, look, I know a lot of you have been wanting to work with me. I know some of you have been on my email list for a long time. I'm just going to be transparent with you. 2023 is going to be a year of experimentation for me. So I'm committing to running this program once more. And once I finish this cohort, it will be decommissioned. I might take lessons and turn them into workshops. I might not. I might turn it into a course. I might not. But I'm telling you right now that in this iteration, this is the last time it will be this way. And it was such a gift to welcome people into that program, to give them my all, and to model for and with them what it's like to say goodbye without resentment or fatigue. So I closed down my most profitable offer because it came from this place of self-trust and this deep knowing that it was time for me to experiment and to expand. And even more frightening than shutting down that offer from a financial perspective was not necessarily having something ready to go to fill in that financial gap. That's sort of true and that's sort of a lie. So the truth is, I have a very full therapy practice, but I only see clients 2 days a week. I have a very long wait list with over 250 clients on it at the time of this recording. So I do know that if I was strapped financially, I could open up that wait list and see clients 3 days a week or 4 days a week and be fine financially. But I also knew that I didn't want to do that. I like having a couple of clinical days a week and then a couple of days a week for experimentation. And that's what I'm talking about with not necessarily knowing what financially was going to fill in the gap, knowing that I had a safety net, but I didn't want to have to use it if I didn't have to.
Yeah, yes. I think this is a really important reminder that our baseline financial security is the most important thing for us as business owners to know. And this is really exactly what we talk about in Lindsay Bottom's conversation this season is how do we know what's enough? How do we calculate what our baseline financial number is? So we can do that calculation, right? We can say, okay, if I have this many one-on-one clients, I know that I will meet my baseline need of this. And then from that point onwards, I can really be in the privilege and the luxury of experimentation. And I can play and try some things that work and some things that don't work. And I can do it without the fire of scarcity fueling the decisions that I make. Because scarcity, if it's real scarcity and it's alive for you, it will block you from hearing that intuitive voice. It will block you from feeling that deep knowing that you are naming, Lindsay. So I I love this reminder of like, you have to be financially safe and secure in order to really play with safety inside of your business. And once you're in that position, then the magical work begins of listening. I just love the way you're talking about deep listening leads to deep knowing about what is right for you. And then we trust. We trust ourselves. We trust our intuition. And we share what is unfolding with our community, with our audience. Like this process really has to be witnessed by others. And I've never known someone to be in this brave, courageous process of releasing what is no longer for us and stepping into the fog of what comes next. I've never known anyone to do that and not to come out on the other side feeling so deeply aligned with the work that they're doing now. Your story is really inspiring. How is it feeling for you? I mean, you said, oh, okay, little vulnerability is here in sharing the story, and now you've shared it, and I'm so curious, like, what's happening for you now?
Yeah, it's what it's reminding me of is having you summarize and reflect for me comes back to this idea of self-trust. And to me, I had those financial self-care practices in place so that I knew my number and I knew which levers I could pull if I needed more income.
Yes.
But also to give myself full permission to look at things as an experiment is incredibly freeing. I think we have a tendency as small business owners to think that if we make a decision, then it is our decision forever and ever. If I niche down, that has to be my niche forever. If I decide I'm going to change my schedule, that has to be my schedule forever. And when we have that type of finality built into how we change and grow and nurture our business, it's really hard because the stakes feel really high if you feel like this is a forever and ever decision. And so to give myself full permission to experiment into expansion is exactly what this self-trust process is. And I think back to the start of the year, I usually do 2023, or I do annual planning at the beginning of the year, and I break it into quarterly goals. I left Q3 and Q4 wide open, like literally just had question marks in there. I'll take a look at this in April, May, June and see what's coming up. And I think even in one of them, I put something really exciting. And I just didn't fill in.
Yeah, great.
Right. So
yeah, it's a fallacy that we can know what the future holds. And I just want to name that so much of what you're saying right now, again, are these byproducts of toxic capitalism, the internalized belief that we pick one thing and then that thing is permanent, it's fixed, and that we should experience continual linear growth of this one thing. You know, it's like quarter to quarter. We need to show growth on our, line graphs forever until we die.
Yeah.
And so many people it's not realistic. And so many people get locked into this belief that we pick one thing and then we have to stick with it forever. And again, it robs us of the play and the flexibility of listening, of deep knowing, of pivoting, of experimenting. And it's a real act of liberation to say no to the belief that things are permanent and to say yes to what you're describing. Yes to experimentation. Yes to trust. Yes to evolution. And as we do that, wow, there's so much more joy and liveness in the work that we're doing. It's really powerful, Lindsay, to hear your story about this offer. And I've, shared with you about like my journey of deciding not to be a therapist anymore. And I'm in the journey again now as I decide to decommission Next Level Therapist, my signature program, and move into a different type of work. It never ends. And I hope it never ends, because this is part of what makes this work so fun and so satisfying for me, is the ability to shift and pivot. And as two women who are shifting and pivoting all the time, we also are intimately familiar with fear.
Yeah.
And how even when we have deep knowing, even when we are so certain that we are moving in the right direction by releasing something and making space for what comes next, it doesn't mean that it's not fucking terrifying.
Exactly. Exactly.
So tell me a little bit about your relationship with fear in these transitions and how you've learned to cope with these fears in your own personal process.
To me, fear has been a really interesting little gnat. Like I'm recording from Michigan, and right now we're on the tail end of mosquito season. And I feel like fear is a little bit like that. Like it's an annoyance, but we think it's going to be worse than it is. In that, like, I don't want to get bit by a mosquito, but if I do, it's totally not the end of the world. And
being from Southeast Texas, I deeply resonate with this example. Yes, please.
Right. Need all the calamine lotion and all of the things. But what fear has kind of reminded me of and shown up as is a few things. One is that fear may be really telling me something is there and something is dangerous, but fear may also be a growth edge in disguise.
Agreed.
So I think about if you are doing a yoga practice, let's say, there's this concept of a growth edge, which is when you are in a pose that is a little bit uncomfortable, it is your responsibility to listen to your body and decide what makes the most sense in that discomfort. Does it make sense to back off completely and hit child's pose? Does it make sense to hang out there for a few breaths and find a new level of strength? Probably those two choices are going to be best for your body. The one that probably isn't going to be great is pushing through that discomfort to the point of injury or pain. And when I think about the way that fear has shown up for me, sometimes it is a real fear, and sometimes it is a growth edge, and in getting comfortable playing with it. I shared with you via email that at the time of this recording, I'm still struggling with some COVID fatigue. I'm on week 9, almost 10 of fatigue, and it has given me a new lens on the power of sleeping on it. And what I mean is I am a person who, when I make a decision, I just do the thing. I never really understood the phrase, just sleep on it. I would be the person who would be up, ruminating, writing out lists, kind of brainstorming. I was not the person who could sleep on something that was concerning. And now I've had the practice of sleeping on a lot of things. And let me tell you, that sleep can give you a lot of clarity. And so I have this running Google Doc about this something very exciting offer that I did a big brain dump on, and then I slept on it, and I came back, and I got rid of things I didn't want to do, and I added a few things I did want to do, and I slept on it again. And I'm getting closer and closer to whatever that next thing is, knowing that it doesn't have to be permanent. I can release whatever this new thing is in a good enough state and be transparent with my audience about what it may look like, and also that it is in its beta version, or to use not businessy terms, it's in its first go around. And we learn a lot the first time we do something. When we think about, so many of us come from academic backgrounds, when you run a pilot program, you cannot evaluate it until you run it first. And so I'm remembering that as well.
I'm reminded of the concept of the window of tolerance, which the therapist listening will understand, but just this very simple idea of, we all have an area where we can be stretched, right? It's like when you go to the gym. Not that I do go to the gym. I'm also not a runner. So I hope this analogy lands. But it's like, okay, it's like pretending like you go to the gym and you're on the treadmill and you're running and you feel okay. And then you start feeling tired and then you start feeling really tired, but you're safe. Your body is okay. Your body can take this. Like you're in a stretch zone, but you're okay. And then there comes a point when your body says, nope, you are about to step into injury and you need to stop. And the window of tolerance works just like that, like that your body can communicate to you like, yeah, this is a stretch. And this is scary and this is new, but you're safe. You're okay. You can do this. And you have to be able to name in your own body when you are moving out of stretch and into injury. And you have to stop when you're into injury. And injury could look like making a financial decision that puts you into real financial scarcity in your life. Or injury can look like stepping into visibility when you are deep in a painful personal process. And maybe you're not really in a place where you can be seen in that way yet. It's different for all of us. But I love what you're saying, that their fear can be your body's way of saying, hey, hit pause. You're moving too fast. You're stepping into injury. And I do think most of the time that potential injury is that you are not financially secure enough to take a risk or to try a new experiment, which is why you should listen to Lindsay Bonham's conversation about how to calculate what is enough and to really know with certainty, pen to paper, what that baseline financial number is that you need to live safely in this world, in your life. But if you're there, if it's a check mark on financial safety, then the fear is probably just this new part of you that is afraid to be seen, is afraid to do the new thing, is just scared because of course we're scared to let go of something that works. Of course we're scared to do something unconventional. Of course we're scared to go against the grain and to really put something that comes from our soul out into the world versus something that comes from our mind. Of course you're scared. It's scary. I have been terrified every time I have pivoted, every time I have tried a new thing. So I love this gentle suggestion to really explore what is the fear communicating to you and to trust that. Whatever it's communicating to you, trust that. And I would also say, in terms of coping with the fear, being in community has been such an important part of the process for me, that left alone in isolation, the fearful parts of my brain can run amok. It's just if you're alone, things can get really dark really fast. But to be in community with people who are really kindred spirits and who are grounded and understand the work that you do and can just hear you and reflect things back and ask critical questions and cheerlead you whenever you need to be supported and push you when you need a little push, that community, I think is a really important and powerful antidote to the fear as well.
Yeah, and going back to this idea of self-trust and financial self-care, I think it's important, as you're talking about community, to also highlight that we have been conditioned to be incredibly individualistic and to go it alone. And in reality, for millennia, we have been creatures who have survived and thrived in community. So as you are moving toward experimenting in something new with your business or learning different ways to practice financial self-care, the incredible power of being seen and being held by others to help you kind of get through this process and learn how to trust yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Oh, Lindsay, this is so beautiful. I absolutely adore the way you are shining a spotlight on this intersection between money and mental health and self and community, that you are really bringing a holistic lens to the way we can be in relationship with finances in our businesses. It's what you're doing, it just brings me out of my thinking brain and it just brings me into the core of myself, which is where I want to live. It's where I want to make decisions from as a business owner. So this has been such a gift, and you are such a gift.
No, thank you. It has been such a treat having this conversation with you and getting to know you in this way and being able to share these types of conversations with others. So thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. And I have one question for you before we go, just a little bonus question.
Oh, okay.
Asking all of our guests this season. So something I'm talking about with all of our guests is this idea that our business should pay us in more than just money, right? I am on a mission to help people rethink what revenue means. What does it mean to generate life force energy from the businesses that we're creating? So I want to know, as a business owner, what is one way your business pays you to live a truly wealthy life and something other than cash in the bank?
This is going to be very specific because it is something I already brought up earlier, but it's also something that I literally just can't get off my mind. And it's something that I've been saying to friends and to my partner and to loved ones, literally with the way that my body needs to heal in these past 9-10 weeks, I have had to take naps in the middle of the day, sleep in, cancel things in the evening. And I keep saying to myself, as awful as this is, I am so thankful. I have a business that allows me to listen to my body and heal. So I may have answered that question in a very different way several months ago, but something that has been very on my mind and on my heart is that it is paying me and is allowing me to actually listen to my body and allow it to rest in ways that I simply would not be able to if I were traditionally employed in an 8:30 to 5. There's just no way in our society that I would have a boss or a manager who would let me take naps, come in late, leave early, cancel meetings. It just wouldn't happen. So that's something that is top of mind.
Yes, rest is revenue. This is so important to remember. And such a topical example, as so many people are struggling with long COVID fatigue.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Yeah, thank you for your honesty about that. And again, Lindsay, thank you so much for joining us this season. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks, Megan.
I hope you really enjoyed this conversation with Lindsay. Her take on finances and weaving in personal healing and wellness just resonates so deeply for me. And I hope it resonates really deeply for you too. If you loved learning from Lindsay today and you want to know more about her and her work, you can check out her website at mindmoneybalance.com. She even has a free financial wellness quiz on her website, which you can find at mindmoneybalance.com/quiz-financial-wellness. We'll put all of those links in the show notes for easy access. And don't forget, if you loved this conversation, to share it with a couple of business friends who you think would benefit from Lindsay's wisdom too. All right, that's all for this week. Thanks for listening to Deeply Rested. I can't wait to connect with you again next week. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Deeply Rested. If you enjoyed this conversation, I would love to invite you to join the Deeply Rested weekly newsletter. You can sign up at deeplyrested.com/newsletter. I hope to meet you in my inbox very soon.